Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Up first, a group of union leaders and former NDP MLAs are warning that the BC government is stalling on its $10 childcare promise. We're asking, what is access to childcare like for you? Is it affordable? At 12:30, Prime Minister Mark Carney met with coastal First Nations leaders in Prince Rupert this morning to discuss major projects. We'll bring you live a press conference by First Nations leaders, and we're asking, what do you hope will be the result of this meeting? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. You can call us now on our first story. What is access to childcare like for you, and is it affordable? Our number is 604-669-3733. You can also dial 1-800-825-5950. Again, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. You can also just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. You can also leave a comment on our TikTok Live. Well, a group of more than 20 former MLAs, as well as MPs and union leaders, say progress on $10 a day childcare has stalled. They've written an open letter to Premier David Eby. Now, the group includes former NDP MLAs Melanie Mark, Jennifer Rice, and Jane Shin, former Vancouver City Councillor Andrea Reimer, and the presidents of the BC Nurses Union and BC Teachers Federation. They say that since BC announced its childcare strategy in 2018, only 10% of childcare has become $10 a day, and funding for those programs, they say, is being rolled back. Katrina Chen is the former NDP MLA for Burnaby and the former Minister of State for Childcare. She spoke to the Early Edition this morning about how many parents in BC actually pay $10 a day.
My understanding is only about 10%, unfortunately. That's really behind our original goal. We do have a fee reduction program that brings down the fees, but definitely not 10 a day. Things I understand there are many challenges that's happening, right, with the impact of COVID, with, a lot of the world situations, the tariffs. But I think it's so important. We did make a 10-year plan, and it's so important that we continue to see the benefits. And actually, we had an economist, James Stanford, who has done a study to show how in 2024, for example, because of our early investment in childcare has brought in $1 billion in revenue for the provincial government. So we really need to look at that and make sure we continue to bring more affordable quality childcare to families and the families who also have children with diverse needs, and also really to our economy as a continuing. This is not just a social program, it is an economic initiative too.
That was Katrina Chen, a former NDP MLA for Burnaby, and was the Minister of State for Childcare when this plan was launched in 2018. We're asking you, what is access to childcare like for you, and is it affordable? You can call us now, 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, or 1-800-825-5950. You can also just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. I'm going to take a quick call here from Alex in North Vancouver. Alex, tell us about your childcare situation.
Hi, yeah, thanks for taking my call. I mean, we're lucky in the sense that we finally got care close to us, which is phenomenal for, not having to commute in the morning and at the end of the day.
How long ago was this, Alex?
That was last July that we got access to something very, very close to us, which has been phenomenal. And we're lucky in the sense that we're in the hopes that that location will eventually turn into a $10 a day site. But just based on the government, I guess, the parameters and the application process, my understanding is they need to operate a year before that is they're able to apply. So this also puts a challenge, like it's the second most expensive thing pretty much in our financial budget that we have to look at every month, and also, makes us think strongly if we're able to have, give a sibling to our daughter, and understand that would be taking a financial burden on of around $3,000 per month, in some cases more, and in some cases maybe a little bit less, but it's so much money.
Can you give me a sense? You said it's your second largest expense. Can you give me a sense of around about how much it's costing you?
I mean, we're lucky in the sense that we're paying about 1,200.
Wow.
And that is on the lower scale. Like we were significantly lucky. The place that we were at prior to July, we were paying about, I think, 15 or 16. And that was still on the luckier scale. But if you decide to have, if you're lucky enough to have more than one kid, if that is your choice for your family, that's upwards of $3,000 a month just on childcare, which is a lot of money.
Alex, I'm really glad to hear from you. Thank you so much for calling.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Alex in North Vancouver. Let me introduce my guest now. Sharon Gregson is the spokesperson for the Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC and did publish this letter. Good afternoon, Sharon. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Michelle. Thanks for covering this important issue.
10% of daycares are $10 a day. How is that the case 7 years after this was announced?
I know, it's shocking, isn't it? This is something that in the last 3 elections, voters have made very clear that they support. As the former minister, Katrina Chen, outlined, there was a 10-year plan starting in 2018. Polling shows this is still incredibly popular. People recognize the connection between quality childcare for children and parents in the workforce and a benefit to the economy. And yet our provincial government, even with $1 billion of federal money each year, is not making progress and in fact seems intent on dismantling the progress that has been made.
Okay, let's go back first to even not dismantling, but why has it stalled? Why has there been no progress on expanding $10 a day daycare?
Well, the last couple of provincial budgets didn't have any increase in provincial spending for childcare. And so that means that programs didn't have the opportunity to transition to become 10 a day. So parents in Vancouver are easily paying $2,000 a month for childcare, even after any fee reduction that the government makes available. We haven't seen the kind of expansion across the province that's necessary. There are new spaces, it's true, but they're still unaffordable for many families. And educators are still receiving what is a stagnated low wage of $29 an hour for their important work. And so we're just not seeing the kind of political will from this government, from David Eby's government, as there was in 2018.
There's so much to unpack there, but I just want to get to how the system actually works because it's quite complex, isn't it? There are several streams, right? There is the $10 childcare program. There's the fee reduction program for childcare facilities. And then there's the affordable childcare benefit that goes to households, and that is income tested. So altogether, when you put those together, how far do those go to address childcare affordability?
Well, you just outlined how complicated it is, and that doesn't help either. So 10% of the childcare we have is 10 a day, which means those programs get enough funding to reduce parent fees to 10 a day. But unfortunately, many of them are starting to face the fact they're going to have to opt out of 10 a day and go back to charging regular fees because the money they receive is being rolled back. This is what I mean when I say government seems intent on dismantling the 10-a-day system that we do have by underfunding the educator wages. And then parents who are in programs that are not 10-a-day, who are funded through the fee reduction that goes to operators, that still only reduces their fees by a small amount compared to the overall fee. And parents are still paying $1,100, $1,500, or even $2,000 a month for childcare. So it's become very chaotic, a lot of chaos, long waiting lists. If you can even get a space, if you feel like you've got a 10-a-day spot, you've won the lottery. It's really not the way it was supposed to be this far into building a system.
My guest is Sharon Gregson, and she is the spokesperson for the Coalition of Childcare Advocates in BC. An open letter has been signed by more than 20 people, some former NDP MLAs, former MPs, former union leaders, and current union leaders as well, saying that the $10 a day childcare program has stalled. And so we're asking you, what is the childcare situation like for you? And do you consider it affordable? Our numbers again, 604-669-3733 1-800-825-5950. You heard Sharon mention their long wait lists, and Candice is joining us now from Kelowna to talk about her experience. Hi, Candice.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, how long have you been waiting?
Well, my daughter was born in April of 2024, and I immediately went on the list knowing it's been a long wait. So we've been about 20 months now. I think our biggest frustration is nobody can tell us where we are in the line. There's literally no communication. It's just kind of sit by the phone and hope it rings one day. That's it.
And this is the wait list for a childcare space that is $10 a day. Was that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So we applied to every space that was within our area, within driving distance for a regular person that has to work, and nothing. And I've gone in person to the facilities and kind of said, can you tell us where we are on the list? It's been almost 2 years. Should we be looking at other alternatives? And unfortunately, nobody can tell us anything.
Wow. So almost 2 years now, 20 months.
Yeah.
What is your childcare situation now then?
So we've had to use family and friends and pay out of pocket. Unfortunately, we decided to have our children later in life, and we're self-employed individuals, so not eligible for maternity. It's been really challenging and really difficult and really frustrating. And it just kind of feels like our concerns are falling on deaf ears. And honestly, at this point, we've kind of thrown our hands up and thought, our daughter will be in preschool before she even has access to affordable childcare.
Right. Yeah, there's that. Yeah, certainly it's been 20 months already. Candice, thank you very much for your call. I'm sorry that you're having to juggle so much. Thank you for the call. Let's take one more call here from Chandra in Kitimat before we go back to Sharon. Hi, Chandra. What's access to childcare like for you?
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Well, I have a bit of experience in childcare, and I have 3 kids and have been kind of in the childcare system for 15 years now. And having been an ECE myself for 15 years, I have a bit of an inside view of what it's like. And even with Candice, I just moved to Kitimat from Kelowna. So I can tell her the wait list for infant toddler care is well over 400. That's what it was like at our daycare.
That's how many people?
And that's how many people were typically at a center on the wait list for infant toddler. So it moves a little bit faster, 3 to 5 center. But here's the big question. We have these facilities. We have funding. There is not ECEs to run them. It is a big issue. And I think that is more important, is where we're getting these teachers and how they're being qualified. Because they're not, early childhood educators are not created equally. There are programs that just kind of chew them up and spit them out. And there are really quality programs that are expensive. I'm talking $10,000 for a diploma, and $10,000 to get paid $25 an hour. It's not really an attractive career, and it's why I left the ECE field as well, because it didn't pay well. So we're losing educators, and we're losing quality of care, which is a big issue.
You are also waiting for childcare, is that right?
Yeah, I'm on quite a few lists, and it boggles my mind because we actually have a center here in Kitimat that's 24/7. So I believe there's 60 spots. It's Tamatek Center for Women, and that's because in this town there's a lot of industry and there's a lot of shift workers. So they have created a daycare that's 24/7 to accommodate them, which is wonderful. But it's not open yet. Something went wrong. There's plumbing issues or something, and so everybody's waiting, and it's been over 2 years. And yeah, like Candice
for the
was
plumbing
saying, a lot of
issues?
communication. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I know.
Waiting on the edge of your seat, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Chandra, thank you so much. Thank you for the expansive experience that you've shared with us, both as a parent and an ECE as well, former ECE. Thank you for the call. Let's go back to Sharon on that. There's that shortage as well, or the lack of early childhood educators. I mean, how do you fill that gap, Sharon?
The province has lots of early childhood educators. The problem is the wages are so low, they're not working in the sector. So lots of people get their ECE credential and then, as your caller described, realize how low the wages are, that there's no pension, there's limited health and welfare benefits. And so they leave to become an EA in the school system or to move on to another profession. So this is exactly why, when I mentioned that wages have stagnated at $29 an hour for ECEs, that in order to build a system, the provincial government needs to implement the wage grid, which it has promised to do, which needs to be between $35 and $45 an hour to not only attract young women and men into the sector, but to keep the qualified, experienced people, as your caller described. So there are solutions. And we've been talking about these solutions now for decades. We've got a concrete plan, which government agreed to adopt in 2018, but they seem to have forgotten the plan. And I think the women who signed the letter today in the Globe and Mail, all, really influential, remarkable women who are just sending a signal to Premier Eby to say, another generation of women cannot be left behind. This is still a feminist issue. And we want you to make this a priority. Lots of other priorities we know for government, but this cannot be left by the wayside.
Well, that's just it. See, I note that there are more than 20 women who have signed this letter. Pardon me, a number of them former NDP MLAs, including the former minister, who was at the forefront when this plan was announced. And so I'm wondering, at this point, what is your view of how much of a priority childcare is for the NDP government under David Eby?
Well, we know that many of the women in cabinet really championed childcare when they were running for office, and in previous terms have championed childcare, recognizing it matters to voters and that it matters for our economy. But for some reason, what's happening around the cabinet table now doesn't seem to be translating into progress. And we recognize with the deficit the way it is that we're not going to achieve everything in year one of the upcoming year, but there has to at least be incremental progress and not moving backwards so that families can see that they have a hope of getting a 10-a-day space. That educators can see that it's worth staying in the sector, not just because they love their work, but because they're valued and fairly compensated. And so there is progress that can be made, even in tight times, because we know the economy benefits when more women can go to work.
Okay, that's just it. I was going to ask, BC is facing record deficits. We talk every day about the impact of the U.S. tariffs on the economy. What is the economic case for $10 a day childcare then?
Well, we've got the data. This isn't just hypothetical that this would be good for the economy. We know from multiple economists, and even looking in 2024, because of more access to childcare, more women able to work, 33,000 more women able to go to work, $1 billion to the BC government in revenues from more women working last year, an impact on GDP since 2019, which is a significant part of the economy. There's economic data to back up this investment. It's not just a cost, it has a return, a positive return for the economy and for government. So there's really no good reason not to do this. It's not to make incremental progress. And that's what the women signing this letter are, tens of thousands of 10-a-day supporters across the province are all looking to the Premier to make a signal in the upcoming BC budget that we can see progress coming on this file.
Let's take a call now as we ask you about the state of your childcare and access to childcare. Is it affordable to you? Christopher is joining us now from Campbell River. Hi, Christopher.
Yes, hi. I just want to make some points in experience. I have someone that works in daycare for a very long time, and what they've noticed is with the $10 a day that they work in, parents tend to leave their children there more and more often and longer. So, like say in the summer when there's less children in the daycare, more parents are leaving them there all day as opposed to before, because it's only $10. Why spend $200 at a summer camp when you can in daycare? So this adds to the pressure of the back to the workers, which has seemed to be the bottleneck of this all in terms of the wages. And then when you're not attracting the people to those positions, they're picking up more foreign people that are taking these positions because it's seen as a way for a permanent residency in Canada to fill that positions, as opposed to a genuine interest in working with children. So that can also kind of water down the quality of the care when you have people that are having a different focus of why they're doing that work in the first place. And those are some observations I've made in that time. And also that at $10 a day, there's people that are very wealthy that can afford daycare. They're getting $10 a day, right down to the person that is scraping by. So I think that should be scaled, as it is in many other years, scaled by income, and that could add some funding back into the system as well, based on their personal income, which we do in other areas.
That's a really interesting point, Christopher. Thank you very much from Campbell River. What about that? Does everybody really need $10 a day daycare? What about moving toward an income-tested system? Sharon?
Right. So it's always so interesting to me. People don't talk about kindergarten that way. We don't talk about those who can afford to pay something for kindergarten should be paying that to help offset some of the expenditures in our education K-12 system.
Yeah, I suppose there are private schools.
For the most families, though, that we still use our public schools. We want to send children to our local elementary school so that they're mixing with their friends and their neighbors. So we don't income test for public school. It's a choice if people decide to go to a private school. We don't income test for people who need to have a heart operation or call 911 or use the local library.
I'm just going to jump in for a moment here, Sharon. My apologies. We're going to pause for a break for our TV audience. We'll see you back here in 2 minutes. And go ahead, Sharon. My apologies for jumping in there. And so you're saying that those priorities or those goals when it comes to education, healthcare should also apply those principles to childcare. Is that right?
There's a reason why childcare moved into the Ministry of Education, because it's about what's good for kids. It's not about income testing for families. And it wouldn't be an issue that people were worried that those driving Teslas are accessing 10-a-day programs. If all the childcare programs were 10-a-day, then it would just be that we want it for everybody. Because there's a lot of bureaucracy that goes into income testing to decide who gets what and who has to pay what.
We have another caller here now. Victor is joining us from Brackendale. Hi, Victor. Do you find childcare affordable?
I've got 3 kids, and luckily they're well off, but this is going to be unpopular. The right-wing governments always say axe to tax. We do need taxes, and I suggest maybe you start retaxing diesel and gasoline for education. Simple idea.
Do you know people who are struggling with childcare, Victor?
Yes, I do. A lot of the neighbors. And they have long waiting lists. Both are professionals. I had a doctor leave Squamish. He couldn't find daycare for his daughter. He ended up moving to Prince George. So, yeah, a lot of people. But like I said, start taxing diesel and gasoline again. Use it towards education and childcare.
Victor.
So, just an idea.
Yeah, thank you so much for the call. That's Victor calling us from Brackendale. We are discussing childcare here and affordable childcare here in light of an open letter sent to the Premier, David Eby, today. And my guest is Sharon Gregson, who's a spokesperson for the Coalition of Childcare Advocates. What response, if any, have you received from the province? What steps are you looking for in the immediate future, Sharon?
Lots of people from around the province really pleased to see this issue being made public and congratulating the women who signed the letter for using their power for good to speak up for everyday families who are struggling with this issue. And we are expecting that this pressure and more pressure to come from childcare operators across the province who are saying that they want to be 10-a-day, but are not getting support from the province. We expect that the mounting pressure should have an impact on the upcoming BC budget so that we can start to see this much needed progress.
I'm sure we'll speak as we approach Budget Day, Sharon. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Michelle.
Sharon Gregson, spokesperson for the Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC. They published an open letter to the Premier warning that the goal of $10 a day childcare has stalled. It is 12:31 now. You're with BC Today, and coming up, we'll talk about that meeting that took place between Prime Minister Mark Carney and leaders with Coastal First Nations this morning. Right now, it is time for a CBC News update, and here is Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Maternity services at Ridge Meadows Hospital will be unavailable for several days starting Thursday. A temporary diversion will be in place until 8 o'clock Monday morning. There have been a number of diversions at both Ridge Meadows and Peace Arch hospitals over the past 6 weeks. Home sales in BC continued a slowing trend in December, reporting an almost 6% drop. The BC Real Estate Association says just over 4,000 homes were sold in the province last month. The average price also fell more than 5.5% to about $952,000. Greater Vancouver saw the biggest drop in sales, down about 12.5% from December 2024. And Coastal First Nations are about to start a news conference after meeting with the Prime Minister this morning. Mark Carney says the meeting was about dialogue with respect to development and conservation efforts. Coastal First Nations President Marilyn Sled has said there is no support among the group's members for a pipeline or a possible suspension of the oil tanker moratorium. And now the forecast. A wind warning is in effect for Haida Gwaii and sections of the north coast. Rain as well this afternoon with highs around 11, highs around 6 degrees and overcast in the Peace. In the central interior, periods of rain with some sunshine and a high of 7. Highs to 9 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, some sun and cloud with a high of 8. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, periods of drizzle this afternoon with highs around 13. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you so much, Rob. Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. A couple of emails here on childcare and childcare affordability. Joseph writes from White Rock, all I hear is a lot of talk and regulations and complications. Here's a thought for the government. Get out of the way. I can't believe the obstacles. Put all the money in a pot. If there's a shortfall, raise taxes a few bucks based on income, of course. I can hear the cries of, quote, I don't have a kid in childcare. Well, I've been paying taxes that fund schools my whole life through property taxes for kids I never had, and I don't care. I don't mind contributing to a community of awesome Canadian kids. That's from Joseph in White Rock. Warren writes, I laugh when I hear about $10 a day daycare. When I first heard about this, my kids were of the age that it would have been great. Now those kids are about to have their own kids. That's the long wait there, Warren. Thank you very much for your email as well. And BC Today at cbc.ca is our address. And yesterday on the show, we talked about the state of BC real estate. And we got these emails too. Daryl writes, the 2025 slowdown is the worst since the mid-1990s. The common denominator? The NDP government in power in both instances. Why aren't developers building? The economy is so poorly managed that no one can afford to buy in. It was the same in the 90s. Until the economy improves, the housing situation won't improve. And the economy won't improve until the party running this province changes. Joan writes, yes, it is a crisis that seems to have no workable solution. I'm a senior living in rented accommodation because I was never able to qualify for a mortgage despite working here for 25 years. I see no end to this problem. Thank you for your emails. BC Today at cbc.ca. Well, a critical meeting this morning for the Prime Minister as he met with leaders of BC's coastal First Nations. We are awaiting a press conference to begin by some of those leaders, and we're expecting to hear from Heiltsuk Nation Chief Marilyn Slett, the Haida Nation President Joseph Alsop, and the Haisla Nation Chief Councillor Maureen Nice. They are scheduled to speak to reporters, and we'll go to that live when it begins. We'll be carrying it through their Zoom feed as they speak from Prince Rupert. Let's go live now to Prince Rupert.
Hi, good afternoon. This morning, our coastal First Nations communities invited the Prime Minister here. We wanted to reiterate that anytime there is a discussion about our territories, that we need to be in the room. And that it is very important to us that the Prime Minister see our territories and understand our concerns. And that is why our leadership invited him to sit and meet with us directly. So today we heard directly from the Prime Minister that his government will seek our free, prior, and informed consent regarding any proposed projects in our territories, and that we will co-develop a transparent process moving forward. We are looking forward to partnering with the federal government to help facilitate projects in our territories that support sustainable economic development and marine protection. We also made our positions very clear and reiterated those positions around our stance regarding the oil pipeline, and that has not changed. Coastal First Nations, along with Blackspalams and the Haisla Nation, oppose any project that proposed to bring oil tankers to the North Coast. We reiterated that there is no technology that can clean up an oil spill at sea, and that it would take just one spill to destroy our way of life. We shared our reliance on a healthy and intact ocean and our determination to protect the ocean and the ecosystem that we rely upon. And it's a reliance not just on coastal First Nations, but Canadians and British Columbians. The Hecate Strait is known as the fourth most dangerous body of water in the world and experiences wildly unpredictable weather and extremely dangerous conditions. And we shared that, and we talked about that, our leadership behind us here and our hereditary leadership. We had many people with us in the room to bring that message forward. The tanker ban is not partisan legislation. It is the result of 50 years of consultation and engagement with our coastal communities. And it is foundational to keeping our coast healthy and our economy strong. We all have aunts and uncles and grandparents that have been a part of different inquiries along the coast. I read, I reflect and I pick up the West Coast Oil Courts inquiry when the Andrew Thompson mission was, in Namu, where we had some of our people there talking about why, we feel the way we feel about oil tankers on the coast, and why it's detrimental to our values and our way of life. One of our elders, had said he did his testimony all in the Heiltsuk language, and he was translated by Ed Newman, and he talked about the one oil spill would finish us. And, we have not deviated from that position at all. And it really does carry forward the work that we do. We made it clear to Prime Minister Carney that we would always support the oil tank moratorium, and we called on him to support it. to protect and grow our sustainable economy that we have built on the North, Central, and Highway. And Agnes will talk about some of the forward-looking discussions that we had concerning our nations and the work that we could do together.
Hello, Marilyn. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope for coming today. It was really important for us to share with the Prime Minister today that coastal First Nations are in support of sustainable economies and that our coastal economy is already an important economic driver in this area worth billions of dollars and is continuing to grow exponentially. So it was, really important that he accepted our invitation to come here in person, see us face to face, and recognize that we're not just talking about strategic trade corridors and global trade, but this is our home. This is a responsibility for the nations to look after our territory for now and future generations. And our current livelihoods and many current livelihoods and sustenance and food security are what we're talking about here with what's currently already happening and the good work that we've done together as nations with BC and Canada and building on these sustainable economies and protecting the thousands of jobs, hundreds of businesses and the billions in economic value that have been generated thanks to those strategic investments in a conservation-led economy. Our coastal economy contributes over $3 billion a year and is growing. And that's what was important to us to share and continue to start to build a relationship with Prime Minister Carney and his government to expand on that. That economy employs up to 30% of the people on the North Coast. Many good jobs here in Prince Rupert. And currently in Northwest BC alone, 40% of these shovel-ready projects that are being identified by the federal government as nation-building priorities are within the Northwest, within these coastal waters, would be impacted in these coastal waters. That includes the recent announcements around expanding LNG projects, critical minerals. And we were very clear in making sure that the Prime Minister understood that each one of those proposals and potential projects has a significant impact on adding to the shipping traffic here on the North Pacific coast, and that we need to make sure that we're prepared for that, and that as each one of these projects goes through its process, that the impacts of shipping, the cumulative effects, coastal erosion, impacts on species and habitat, our communities, our culture is all factored into how we're analyzing this and investing and preparing for that increase in traffic. We are very clear that we support sustainable economies. We're respectful of the challenge that the federal government is facing. And we want to be as flexible as we can in finding ways to work together, but based on our existing agreements and relationships established over many years between the coastal nations, Canada and BC, and coastal communities. Our communities the reality is we are the ones that are impacted by this proposed increase in shipping and projects. We're the first responders, and we need to be prepared for that. We have firsthand experience from the nation standing here today, responding to the sinking of the Queen of the North, to the Nathan E. Stewart, to close calls like the Simishir. And we need to be deeply involved in collaborating and preparing for that, for existing traffic and proposed increases in traffic in the years to come. So our message was clear. We're not ready. The coast is not ready right now to respond to accidents and emergencies. It takes days to respond. We know the adverse conditions here of weather and tides. And there is an urgent need to prepare our coast for the projected 217% increase in shipping traffic, and make sure we equip our communities with the training, the equipment, the asset, the skills, and our ability to respond swiftly to make sure that people are safe and our ecosystems are safe. So we're happy that the federal government has recognized the situation and the need for increased marine capacity to address the growing impacts of shipping on our sensitive ecosystems and environments, in our culture, our communities, and that we have shared priorities within our existing agreements in our Oceans Reconciliation Framework Agreement, in our Great Bear Sea Marine Protected Area agreements, and we're looking forward to the next steps in working together to fully implement those agreements and commitments that have been made, and they need to happen in a timely way. Questions?
Yeah, thank you. We can take questions.
You've just been listening to Jason Alsop, who is the president of the Haida Nation and vice president of the Coastal First Nations, saying that from their perspective, their communities would be the ones impacted by a proposed increase in shipping. And his message was that the coast is not ready to respond to accidents involving tankers or shipping of oil. And before him, we heard from Marilyn Slett, who's president of the Coastal First Nations and the chief of the Heiltsuk Nation. And her message saying, again, reiterating that they have not deviated from their position opposing a proposed pipeline, and saying that they would always support the oil tanker moratorium, saying, though, that they're looking forward to partnering with the federal government on projects that do support sustainable economic development as well as marine protection. You're listening to BC Today. We'll bring you back to the press conference as they are starting now to take questions from reporters, and I see Chief Marilyn Slett coming up to the podium to respond now. Let's go back to Prince Rupert.
So we're going to see in shipping traffic with these projects. Right now, we're looking at 217% increase with transits topping over 1,000 trips a year. These are things that, we definitely have concern. It provides for cumulative damage and effects, on the seabed and on the ocean. We talked about, having essential marine response capacity to deal with the increased risk and to safeguard the corridor to ensure safe and responsible low impact shipping. The position that we have on the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act is really grounded on, these projects that we see that have been greenlit or about to be greenlit, and that we can't see or support in any way oil tankers on top of that. And we've committed to each other, we've committed to the work that we do to ensure that this is done in the safest, most responsible way. That's not something that we can see happening with oil. And so we see that there's a lot of work ahead of us, with these projects being greenlit. And, there's a lot of work ahead of us to make sure that, what we say or what people, proponents say that, it's going to be safe, that it is, and the work that we do as Coastal First Nations, is a part of that work.
Marilyn, Wolf Tepper, Canadian Press. What was the Prime Minister's reaction when you shared with him your group's ongoing opposition to the proposed pipeline? How did he sort of react, both physically, if you wish, and verbally? And based on that reaction, what did you take away, or what are you taking away from it in terms of going forward? Because we have Alberta pushing the federal government to sort of speed up this project, and obviously your position has remained. Ultimately, what do you see this thing end up?
Well, we felt that it was a good meeting. It was positive. We we had our message that was very clear and consistent, with our communities there with us. You heard directly from our communities how we feel, from all of our communities that spoke. We talked about, the relationship that we have with the ocean, the relationship that we have with, making sure that, it's sustainable and protected for future generations. I think we felt that he was listening. He was attentive to hearing what we were saying with his body language. We talked about, certainly, the need for more discussion, right? That this can't be a one-off meeting, that we have to, be able to work together and continue to have that dialogue. And I think that there is a commitment here to, ensure that that dialogue happens.
Question for either one of you.
You've been listening to Health Sec Chief Marilyn Slett with the Coastal First Nations, the president there, saying that the reaction from the Prime Minister, she said, was attentive to hearing what we were saying with his body language, but she also said there would be a need for more discussion and that this can't be a one-off meeting. This is BC Today, and you've been listening to Coastal First Nations leaders speak about their meeting with the Prime Minister this morning as he landed in Prince Rupert to meet with these leaders who have staunchly opposed lifting a moratorium on oil tankers off the North Coast. You'll recall that recently the Prime Minister signed an energy memorandum of understanding with the Alberta government, which opens the door to a bitumen pipeline from Alberta to BC's North Coast. And so joining me now on the significance of this meeting is CBC's provincial affairs reporter, Katie DeRosa, who's been watching this press conference as well. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Michelle.
Listening to all of that and the lead up as well, can you sum up for us how significant was today's meeting?
Well, Prime Minister Mark Carney said, today was about dialogue, but that was a dialogue that the Coastal First Nations had been asking for months. They had hoped that he would meet with them before signing the MOU with Alberta. So, they were saying leading up to this, that was a missed opportunity to get their perspective right off the bat. But as Marilyn Slett said, they were very clear in their continued opposition to that tanker ban, saying that they're already on board with other resource projects in British Columbia, like LNG, like critical minerals, and that basically lifting the tanker ban is just going too far. And now I did get a statement from the Premier David Eby is in India, so was unavailable, but Environment Minister Tamara Davidson said, while today's meeting between the Prime Minister and Coastal First Nations is an important step, it does not change the reality. A catastrophic oil spill would threaten our marine environment and jeopardize current and future economic opportunities in the region. So the BC government not backing away from its staunch support of that tanker ban. So I guess what's next is finding out from the Prime Minister of where he stands, if he's looking at lifting that, as the Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is pushing for.
And we should also note that the Prime Minister is on his way to China on a trade mission as well. And part of that shoring up more markets or improving and boosting markets for Canadian products, including energy. And can you take us through, you said that Coastal First Nations had been calling for a meeting like this. How has the federal Liberal government approached that opposition so far until today?
Well, I know Mark Carney was continuously, he has been saying that this pipeline will not get built without, one, First Nations consultation, and two, a private sector proponent. The proponent is still missing in action, right. But Danielle Smith has said we need the circumstances such as the tanker ban to be lifted in order for that proponent to come forward. But enter now in the last week the situation in Venezuela, the U.S. Donald Trump's takeover of Venezuela's Venezuela's oil industry, that ramps up the pressure. Danielle Smith and Pierre Poilievre both saying that this makes it even more imperative to get that second oil pipeline built so that we can get our markets overseas to Asian markets and not be so reliant on the U.S. So it really does tie into the Prime Minister's trip to China. I'm sure he's not going to sign any deals, imminently, but opening the door to selling our energy to China, and what does that do for the demand for our bitumen? So, however, Premier David Eby has previously said that Asian markets are looking for renewable energies like LNG. So, really a debate for what the global political situation means for the pipeline debate.
And as you said, we're waiting to hear what the Prime Minister has to say coming out of that meeting and his take on how it went. I'm sure people will be asking him that. But what do you make of what we've just heard from the Coastal First Nations leaders, Katie?
Well, it sounds like they're happy they got the meeting. They're happy that the dialogue has been established. Even if it was overdue, we'll have to hear what Premier David Eby's response is. But I think, again, they're trying to show Mark Carney that yes, he has supported other major projects like LNG, like critical minerals, the Red Chris mine, through the federal major projects office, and that those projects, the support for those projects, could be in jeopardy from the First Nations in that area if he were to bulldoze through a pipeline. So they're really tying all these resource projects together and say, do you want to jeopardize some other major projects if a pipeline is the only thing we're looking at?
Katie, I'm sure we will continue to follow this and more reaction to today's meeting throughout the day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle.
Katie DeRosa, CBC's provincial affairs reporter, joining us from Victoria. And yes, much more coverage on today's meeting between Coastal First Nations leaders and Prime Minister Mark Carney taking place in Prince Rupert. This is BC Today here on CBC.